And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the MCU ReVU. I am one of your hosts, Elliot Serrano, from the Shaken Not Heard podcast, the James Bond podcast that no one listens to, as well as Caffeinated Comics, our brother show, our sister show, which is the host of this particular show on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Today we have a packed lineup. We've got a lot of guests. But before we jump into that, let me pull in one of our co-hosts. Is Dave? How you doing, Dave?
Hey, how are you?
I have had better days.
You sound like it. I could just tell from your voice.
Yes, and I'm going to tell you, folks, just so you know. I mean, I've been sick. This was my birthday weekend, by the way, and it was supposed to be a big celebration. And I had friends who were ready to take me out and do all these things. Of course, I got sick right before everything, and I've just been home, just sick and not being able to sleep. And add to that, when we recorded our review of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness for the Caffeinated Comics podcast, I got a nosebleed. We're talking in the middle of freaking recording the show. If we were live streaming it like we do this show, you would have seen me desperately trying to stop my nosebleed. But no, there will be no video of that one, and you can't really see it when you listen to it on the podcast. How about you, Dave? How's your weekend been?
Good. I had today off, so I had a nice 3-day weekend. I used today to just kind of unwind, get some errands done. I wasn't able to over the weekend, so pretty good.
Glad to hear it. Yeah. And also returning to the show, he is our honorary mixologist and comes up with our MCU ReVU themed drinks. Thomas Jetner, how you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great. I've got a nice rye and cognac-based cocktail in front of me, so I'm doing pretty good.
I can't drink. That's the thing. I wanted to make one of those for myself tonight. My body's just not up for it. I mean,
hot toddy.
A hot toddy, yeah, that might work.
There you go.
I've been not in the best shape, but life goes on. This is not a heavy lifting day for me because I happen to have someone that I've been dying to get on this show for the longest time. I've wanted him. We asked him to be on Shaken Not Heard, but he wasn't such a big fan of James Bond. I said, well, what about if we talked about the Marvel movies? And he said, definitely, which I went, because actually I know this guest of ours more as a DC fan, but I know he loves Marvel too. He is the host of the Laurence Holmes show on 670 The Score. Laurence Holmes.
Yo!
Hey!
Look, the thing is that I like Bond. I just don't know it. I would feel naked coming on to the James Bond podcast and not be able to talk about it.
Much like Chris Ranji did when he was on to talk about it that one time.
But he's just so handsome that it doesn't matter. So
he faked it so well. He was just like, I mean, he even told me, he goes, I'm not really a big Bond fan. I went, but if you want, I'll come on. And we had him and Connor on. Connor McKnight, who a mutual friend of ours.
GoldenEye himself.
Yes, he's an Uber geek and knew his Bond too. So it was fun. It was a fun time. But Laurence, for folks who may not know, I mean, you know him, but you may not know the connection that he and I have. Is that first, Laurence and I, we've been colleagues for, I'd say, 10 years now.
Yeah, I would say over a decade.
A decade. Friends, I like to say we're friends. I mean, I've been to your house. I've been to your Super Bowl parties.
You've drank my liquor, sir.
Yeah, I have. I've drank your liquor. Tom, you're gonna love this. And Dave, hold on to this story for the next time we have your buddy Chris on. Yes, I have drank his liquor. I've also spilled his liquor, like on his really sensitive stereo equipment. So we talk about that. We talk about the subwoofer incident, which he never brings it up. Okay, folks, just so you know, Laurence never brings it up. He said it was not a big deal. But when I stand before my creator and they talk about all the things that I regret, it's going to be Carol Nikowski That time I didn't take that job and spilling the booze on Lawrence's subwoofer. Those are my big three regrets.
So not a big deal. If it's a party, drinks get spilled, especially drinks that were that good. So
it was
Depends
a Herb
on the
Lawrence.
booze.
Yeah, but it was a Herb Lawrence drink. It was the thing. And when Herb, if you've ever partied with Herb brings some serious stuff too. So,
yes, he does.
But anyway, but not only that, but Lawrence gave me the title King of Geeks of Chicago. It came from Laurence. So whenever you see that on my Twitter banner, when you see it on my Facebook page, whenever people announce me as the King of Chicago Geeks, it's not a title I gave myself. Laurence gave it to me. It comes from him.
It is earned. It is very much earned. The King of the Geeks. So I'm honored to be here and be able to rock my Cap shirt and everything else and talk about Winter Soldier. So thank you for the invite.
Well, thank you for being here. And since you do bring that up, hey, let's jump into it. We'll start off with a segment, a segment called the 2-minute MCU review. So we'll go around the horn and we'll start with our guest, Laurence, first. If you can encapsulate in 2 minutes pretty much your overall review of Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
I love this movie so much. And I love it because I grew up reading Cap, and I always was a fan of the relationship between he and Sam. And I thought that Winter Soldier went so far to give you a really good and deep understanding why Cap and Falcon were kind of kindred spirits. And I really love that. I thought this movie had just about anything that you would want. It had Cap in like full Cap mode, him taking on regular people and like seeing how devastating he is versus regular people was great. It had all of the Shield, Hydra, espionage, and it had Robert Redford in it. I don't think that at this point Marvel was still looking for credibility, because I think that the movies that had come before it had already kind of set the standard for that. But the fact that perhaps the biggest movie star of the 20th century decided it would be good to be associated with the MCU. Mwah. Like even my mom was like, oh my God, Robert Redford is in this movie. So all in all, I thought it was everything that I wanted from a Cap movie. 2 hours and 15 minutes of just nonstop Cap being Cap.
Since neither of you guys are jumping in, I'm gonna pass it off to Tom.
Okay. All right. I agree with almost everything with what Laurence said. I think this is a fantastic movie. In watching it a second time, I think the word I kept thinking was kinetic, because it's a movie that really moves at a particular pace. And I was trying to put a finger on what that was, and it occurred to me that you can break it down into 4 episodes of Community, which is the sitcom that the Russo brothers were directing before getting this job, and then actually helped them get the job with their 2-part paintball episode at the end of season 2. You can break it down. The first 30 minutes of the movie is like a action comedy with Cap and Sam on the ship, and then interacting with Fury. And then you get the 70s thriller that's normally talked about with this movie in the second quarter, where you're unsure of who to trust. And then right at the midpoint, Arnim Zola breaks it open with the Hydra revelation. And now you're into being chased by the Winter Soldier like it's the first Terminator movie. And then the fourth quarter of the movie, it turns into Star Wars, like the second half of that Community 2-parter, where you have to destroy the death weapon with the secret flaw that only they know about, or something like that. So but what holds it together are the character relationships, in particular the Cap and the Sam relationship, which is the story of this week's drink, which is a mix. The on your left is a cross between, there's a cocktail called the Brooklyn, and which is a rye, dry vermouth, maraschino liqueur, and then there's a Maripicon, which is like a bitter drink. and it's a cross between that and effectively a Sazerac, which is or a Vieux Carré, which often has a rye, cognac, or brandy blend as its base spirit, and then uses Peychaud's bitters as its bittering agent. So, and as we found out recently in Falcon and Winter Soldier, MCU Sam is from Louisiana. So this seemed like a good way to kind of demonstrate that relationship in liquid form. So,
And if you go to the MCU ReVU Facebook page or the MCU ReVU Instagram, you will find that there, the recipe for the On Your Left, as created by one Tom Jetner. All right, he just got in from a flight from Miami or New York. I don't know where he's been. Let's before we go on to our next reviewer, John Clark. How you doing, John?
I've been here the whole time.
I was trying to make you sound exotic and different.
I'm like the Falcon of this podcast. I'm not in the beginning at all. And then they just throw me in while everything else is going on. I am sweating from running to be here on time.
And John Clark is, of course, the host of the Caffeinated Comics podcast, which he normally co-hosts with Stephen Brown. Catch it every week on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. I was just on Caffeinated Comics again last night when we were talking about Doctor Strange, where I was sounding like Death Warmed Over and suffering from a case of, I mean, it looked like The Exorcist or whatever. Blood was gushing out of me. And
you sounded worse last night, but you're complaining more tonight.
That's true. That's true.
Well, the
So
power
really,
of Christ compels him.
Oh, I can see where this night's going.
Well, you choose to fight back.
There we go. We're in the 2-minute review. So let me pass it off to you, Dave.
I want to point out that I think they establish better chemistry between Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson in like the first 30 seconds of this movie, or like 2 minutes of this movie, than between Anakin and Obi-Wan and the entire prequel trilogy combined.
Ouch, man.
Of this movie.
I'd like to report a murder.
not
wrong. I love the tone of the movie. It's very sort of tangibly different from the first Captain America. Obviously, the big time shift is a big part of that. But yeah, I love the feel of it, the sort of the mood of the whole movie. I like that they got Robert Redford, because I don't know if it was before this movie or after. There was like a meme that was going around of like fan casting the MCU movies if they were made in different decades, like the 60s and 70s and 80s. And like 70s, the Avengers circa 1970 something, you'd invariably have people saying, oh, Robert Redford would be a perfect Steve Rogers. And he would have been. He would have been great, 40, 50 years ago. He would have been a perfect Captain America. So it's cool that they brought him in as the villain in this one. Although you don't obviously realize he's the villain at the start. So yeah, I think this for the longest time, probably until Civil War came out, was my favorite MCU movie, and I still rank it pretty highly. I also want to point out that Tom said there's a drink of the week, but he actually sent me 3 drink recipes. So I have 3 in front of me. So I'm about to go like full Harry Carey by the end.
I went a little overboard this week because we were discussing it afterward, and we had come up with basically 3 completely different ideas. And yes, there are just as long and involved backstories for both of those other drinks as for the On Your Left. So
yeah.
We will share those on the Facebook and the Instagram. Don't worry, folks. We won't go into it now, but we will share them.
Yep.
And finally, John.
Yeah. This is the movie that changes everything, I think. This is the Avengers is the big hit, but this is where there's a leap in quality. And, we just covered like Thor Dark World, which is much, much lower. There is a jump in quality in this where this is the bar that every Marvel movie is measured against now, where these are actually really, really good movies where When you read all the think pieces about there's too many superhero movies, there's such a push against that because it's like, yeah, but these are actually really good. These aren't action movies of the 80s anymore. And there's no going back after this. Like, you cannot make another Iron Man 3 anymore if you're Marvel. You can't lower the bar. You can't lower the budget after this. And because it's great, and yet it's completely stands out where they were like, well, we're going to make it a political thriller. We're going to make it a militaristic movie. We're going to keep the power levels low. We're not going to get it too crazy. But by finding its own tone and making it its own thing, it kind of puts the pressure on every other movie to be a little unique.
I love what John is saying about the keeping the power down on the movie. The fact that you that's why I was saying about like seeing Cap versus regular human beings, and then seeing regular human beings like in fight scenes, like Agent 13 in Rumlow and inside a shield. It was a more tangible movie for those that wanted to get into the MCU and see a superhero movie, but maybe weren't quite ready for what was getting ready to happen. It's a great primer to see something that doesn't have, at least at the time, not until we get to the end credits, that doesn't have galactic consequences. It has very tangible things of distrust of society, distrust of all of the things that are supposed to keep us safe. That's right there for you inside of Winter Soldier. I think it's one of the things that makes it it's a very easy to swallow superhero movie. And of course, like Elliot, when you started talking about like all of these movies, and John brought it up about the superhero movies of the 80s and I'll add the 90s. All I kept thinking on my rewatch of Winter Soldier was about that god awful Shield movie in the 90s with David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury, and it was Lisa Rinna, right, as Maria Hill, and I just went, look at how far we've come. Like instead of having the helicarrier look like a Zeppelin, the fact that we had 3 helicarriers and they looked and reacted the way that you would imagine they were. I found myself just being so proud of where we were as a society that we could actually do a movie like that and it looked good.
All right, not that I'm going to necessarily defend the David Hasselhoff shield. Okay?
Here we go.
Yet again, it always comes down to the David Hasselhoff shield.
It always comes down to that. But the dude was a fan. The budget was crap. I mean, let's be honest.
There's no doubt about that, and I appreciate the effort, but damn, it was terrible.
The budget was a budget that could afford David Hasselhoff, and no higher.
Yeah,
it's not like David Hasselhoff was let down by the budget of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Wow.
It's not like Robert Downey Jr. on Ally McBeal. It's David Hasselhoff.
Wow. Well, now we're going.
That's a good topic. Who do you guys think could have played Nick Fury better than David Hasselhoff in like the late 90s? Before they changed his race and made him specifically looks like Samuel Jackson and then cast Samuel Jackson to fulfill.
That feels like a straw dog day because you're putting anyone against Samuel Jackson in my head.
Well, all right, let's have a little bit of fun with this because there's already at least 2 actors that were rocking patches. We could have gone with Kurt Russell. Snake Plissken could have come in there and been Nick Fury. I think people would have bought that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's really good. And before we move on, real quick, I will give my own 2-minute review because I have nothing new to offer than what you guys have already said. I will say this. This is the movie that I use when people say, should I watch MCU films? I go, start with this one. If you like this one, you're going to like what comes next. If you don't like it, then you might as well just stop. because this one, as you guys said, most accessible, sets a new standard. It has a whole bunch of elements that make it really relatable. Yes, the power levels are low. The one thing that I really do appreciate that the Russos will show over time as they make these movies is they're going to show a difference between what it is to be a superhero, what they can do versus what the average Joe can do. So in the beginning, you have, Steve Rogers is able to do laps, multiple laps, around the Washington Monument, without any problem. And you're like, whoa. And it doesn't even look silly, like they speed him up, like with the advancing, speeding up the film frames. It looks really believable. So yeah, this is the one I say. If you've never seen him before and you want a good one to start with, well, Iron Man 1, of course, but I would say, if not that one, Winter Soldier is a great one to get anyone who's a fan of any other sort of action film, whatever. This is the one to do it with. All right. Let me drop that. And of course, we are talking about Captain America, the Winter Soldier, released in 2014, starring Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Sebastian Stan, and Anthony Mackie. Screenplay by Chris Markus and Stephen McFeely. They will go on to do several screenplays for the Russos. Directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, as Tom said, known mostly for Community, the comedy television series. And this film is also, the Russos are doing this right in the middle of, or maybe towards the end of Joss Whedon's tenure as the Lord of the MCU. Up until this point, we haven't gotten Age of Ultron yet. Joss Whedon was supposed to be putting together an Avengers trilogy that was going to pay off with them fighting Thanos in the third film. But by the time Age of Ultron comes out, he's going to be like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And Kevin Feige is going to turn the keys of the kingdom over to the Russos. As you'll see with Civil War, if you were concerned that a pair of comedy directors couldn't do an Avengers movie, you watch Civil War, which we'll get to down the line. They were perfectly more than capable. So just so you know, folks, if you're watching us on the Twitch page, if you're watching us on Facebook Live or on the YouTube page, you can comment. You can also check out the video archive of earlier episodes of the show. Feel free to write to us at mcureview@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions. And then add to that, I do read all the comments. I want to thank everyone who tunes in, who watches, whether you're watching us live or you're watching the archive, you're watching, replays of the show on our many channels. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. And yes, the audio version of the show will be made available on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network in about a week or so. I know that Caffeinated Comics has got a lot of episodes though to get caught up on. There's
too much news.
There's a lot of news going on. Yes.
Doctor Strange came out and Neil Adams died and George Perez died, and then there's Star Trek, and so we are a little behind on the audio schedule of the MCU review.
Well, since you bring that up, let me ask you, Laurence. I mean, with that news, and I know you're a big fan of comic books. I mean, that's one of the things that I think we had in common, kind of like what helped us become friends. And I know you're a big DC fan. Question, was George Perez more of a DC artist to you or a Marvel artist?
Oh, my God. I would... That's a hard question. I always wonder what the artist thought was their best work, because that to me kind of tells the story. Like, do you feel like you were able to be the freest when you're penning DC versus penning Marvel? Huh.
And
what do you guys think? Like, what? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, how would you characterize someone that had fame in both circles on what it is that they would deem themselves an artist of blank?
Yeah, that's it. That is tough, because when I think of George Perez, the first thing I think of is JLA versus Avengers, which is, the Marvel DC crossover to beat all Marvel DC crossovers. For me, it's really the age you come in. So when I started reading comics, George was drawing New Teen Titans and the history of the DC universe and Crisis. So to me, he was a DC artist. I missed him on Fantastic Four. I missed him on Avengers. And then when he came back to Avengers in the late 90s, I was like, oh, the DC guy is coming over. So in my mind, he's always been DC. And I think that's just because of the time that I started reading the comics. There was a clear division of like, these are the Marvel guys, these are the DC guys, until John Byrne crosses over. And then I get totally confused.
And then there's the Wonder Woman stuff too.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, like, that's kind of iconic. So, I mean, that's a good argument. I guess you're probably right. He's a DC guy that went to Marvel instead of being a Marvel guy who used to do DC. I know that's a very small differentiation, but a differentiation nonetheless.
Yeah. And you could ask the same question about Neil Adams, who also passed away this week. I mean, he did an Avengers run. He did an X-Men run. He did some Thor. But do we get past Green Lantern, Green Arrow? Do we get past Batman?
I think Neil Adams was the definitive Batman artist. I love his stuff. So good. So good.
It was like he took Adam West and made him scary.
Yep.
Mike, I'm going to task Tom with coming up with 2 drinks, one themed for Mr. Perez and another one for Mr. Adams. So for the Perez, the George Perez is going to be a drink that is impossible for only one person to be able to pull off, which is a lot of what George Perez's artwork was. You see what he did, you go, I can't think of anyone else who could have ever done that. His art style, everything, incredible. You're right, John. JLA versus Avengers, the best. It still holds up. I was just
the fact that he drew it in the early 80s. And then everybody got mad at Jim Shooter, and it didn't happen. And then they did it again. He did it, came back to it in the 90s, and everybody thought he was going to reuse those pages. Started from scratch, and it was better. They put those pages in the deluxe absolute version, and they're not as good as what he did 20 years later.
Yep. And then Tom, the Neil Adams, which is something fun that then becomes scary. So
that would be Malort.
That would be.
That sounds like the evening.
All right, and I also want to congratulate.
Sounds like Elliot's voice.
Yeah, there we go. I want to congratulate Laurence for his little interview style jujitsu, where he takes a question and he turns it around and makes everybody else answer it. Very clever, very clever.
I mean, I'm in a room with people who are smarter than I am. Why would I then venture off an opinion when there are more people that are more versed in it that can give a better, deeper response than I can? Like my response is mostly going to be, man, I loved when he was on Teen Titans, when they pulled back the fourth wall and there he is, and it was just so great and so adorable. You're just like, man, this is what it's about right here.
There you go. That's a great point. All right. So beyond that, the Winter Soldier was also going to do another thing. Let me ask you guys this, and maybe this is just me, but I've always had an issue with Bucky Barnes being the Winter Soldier because they made it seem like because he was Captain America's partner that you could also turn him into a super soldier. And that will be a theme. It's not only in the comics, but in the movies that they're constantly trying to recreate super soldiers in the Marvel universe or in the MCU, but it only succeeds if you're a certain person. I don't know. So I don't. While I appreciate that they brought back Bucky, who for the longest time was the only character in comics that stayed dead. You know, for folks who know comics, when you die in comics, you don't stay dead. Right now, the only character that now is still dead is Ben Parker. Peter Parker's Uncle Ben. And even Dan Slott wanted to bring him back at one point, which the editors at Marvel said, no, can't do it. But yeah.
I mean, hey, like one of my most prized possessions comic wise is the death of Captain America. And I remember how that comic book broke me. Like it broke me because I'm such a huge Cap fan. And even then, I was like, he gonna be back though, right? Like, you can't have a Marvel universe without Captain America in it, can you? And then he was back, and it was weird.
What's funny, you should mention that because Death of Captain Marvel was written by Ed Brubaker, who created the Winter Soldier, whose run on the Captain America book was the basis of this particular screenplay. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that you tell was from the comics. Ed Brubaker even makes a cameo appearance in the movie as one of the scientists that's kind of like mind wiping James Buchanan Barnes. They
set up the Bucky super soldier thing in First Avenger, because when Steve finds him, he's on that like table or something like on the Hydra base. So they, at least in the MCU, they did manage to set up the idea of like they picked him randomly. And obviously it's a bad choice, because had they picked anybody but Bucky, does Hydra's plan succeed? Like, if they picked any one of those 500 POWs in that random camp, and I don't know where they were in First Avenger, do they succeed because you just get a random guy who has no connection to Steve Rogers just has no qualms about just shooting it?
Yeah, he doesn't have the reset button that Bucky has.
What if it's Jim Dum Dum Dugan? He was there.
Oh, and his mustache.
Anyway, so yeah, that's a good point, Tom. Another funny thing is that Ed Brubaker, who appears in this movie, says he gets more money from appearing in the film for the 3 minutes or whatever he's in it than he ever got from Marvel Studios for pretty much writing the movie for them.
Wow.
Yeah, for creating a character that's now been in 4 movies in a series?
In a series. And he gets nothing. No royalties, no compensation for that.
Freelance contracts. Get a page rate.
All right. Okay, let me throw this over to Dave. Dave is the because Dave and I do Shaken Not Heard together, and this is an observation I made after rewatching Winter Soldier. I went, hold on a second. If Sharon Carter is Agent 13, then how can Hawkeye's wife also be Agent 13, as revealed at the end of the Hawkeye series?
Are you asking me that?
Well, I'm giving you a segue because it's like, it's kind of like a
No Time to Die.
Oh yeah, well,
2 007s and No Time to Die.
Yeah, really, yeah.
I'm seeing double here. 4 007s. Yeah. That's a good question. I don't have an answer to it.
You can, wow. See, you could have done like Laurence, which was kick it off. Say, oh yeah, that's very interesting. Well, I would. What do you think?
I think therapists do. And what do you think about that,
Dave? Do you think at this point that by the time they got to Falcon and Winter Soldier, they just realized that they had Linda Cardellini like on the payroll, and they decided like, oh, we can do other things with a terrific actress beyond just having her appear as the wife character?
Okay,
yeah.
So
anything that involves more Linda Cardellini, I'm all for.
I'm all for it too, but I'm doing an image search on the watch, and it says 19, not 13.
Okay.
6 off.
That she's Agent 19, not Agent 13.
All right. Let me do that real quick since we're pulling that out. And okay. Oh, Agent 19 in Hawkeye. Well,
That's good because 19 is legal.
Oh man. No.
I wanted somebody else to tell that joke, and nobody picked it up.
Yeah, no one's gonna touch that. No. Okay, yep, I do stand corrected. That is correct, Laurence. Let me put this up on the screen for folks who aren't near.
Yay! Woo! I finally got something right.
Yeah.
I totally misread. I misread that when I saw it the first time. I could have sworn it was Agent 13.
Now, Elliot, this is why you can't run Shield. Because if you say Agent 13 has died, you've upset so many people that don't need to be upset.
Well, you know
You gotta
what?
get your-
Speaking of running Shield, can I just say that when it comes to Winter Soldier, one of the things that I do think is endearing to the audience is Cap's rage against the machine with the bureaucracy of Shield. Like that, like the bureaucracy of the Shield and the bureaucracy of government becomes an evil that he's fighting against, and it makes it really hard, really easy to root for him, because you're like, man, this is some bullshit. Like all of this stuff, like all of these layers of this organization, and when we get I don't know if the Russos did this on purpose, but even when we get to Shield itself, like the big building, and you have the Triskelion, right? Where you have like, it is just a monument to secret money and bureaucracy. And even like on the elevator, where we know everything's about to go down on the elevator, like all of the different places that one could go in the Triskelion, like all of it, you just sit there and you go, I understand why Cap is tired of this shit right here. I'm tired of it too, and I don't even work for Shield.
They have 3 aircraft carrier sized spaceships in hangars in the basement.
Right.
It's, you know, with like an iceberg has like 60% or 75% of its mass is below the water. It's like 70% of Shield is like you can't see it.
Yeah, but what impresses me so much about this movie, talking about Shield, is this is also one of the first movies that's really not afraid to take chances. They just blow up Shield at this point. They seemingly kill Nick Fury twice. They find out that everyone's Hydra. Cap is on his own. In fact, at this point, they had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on at ABC, and they didn't tell the showrunners. It was like at the last minute, they were like, oh, by the way, we destroyed S.H.I.E.L.D. in this movie. Good luck. So it was great that they stuck with it. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that season had to deal with like Hydra and course correct and figure it all out because they weren't going to get out of it. And I love that risk taking that Marvel does, which most franchises wouldn't do, is that, okay, we're going to do this huge thing. We're going to stick with it. You know, as you said, Elliot, characters are never dead forever in comics, but in movies they are. You know, we didn't get a lot of people coming back in the MCU, even as much content as we have. This was a big, big deal, and it still is.
You'll have the stuff that happens in this movie kind of echoes throughout the rest of the story. I mean, and of course, when you get into Endgame and the Avengers are doing their time heist, and they have to go back in time through different periods, and they step back into Avengers, but who do they run into?
Rumlow.
But yeah, they run into, Robert Redford, and then like, what? And then wow, and then there are all those little, oh my goodness, and it's, look how that played out over time. It makes me wonder too if that whole thing with S.H.I.E.L.D. getting blown up is maybe a reason why Joss Whedon ended up pretty much leaving the whole Marvel production, because his brother and sister-in-law were the showrunners on S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time. And they were the ones created, and that was their baby. And then next thing you know, it's all getting tossed. And there's a lot of other stuff that would be going on. We've talked about this in previous episodes. The production on Ant-Man, there's differences of opinion between the studios and Edgar Wright, till Edgar Wright finally says, I can't do this anymore. I'm done, And you'll see that now with all the movies as they go. It's like they kind of start following a certain template,
Well, and that's why it's so perfect that the Russos are doing this, because as we're all saying, the Russos come from television. And this is also the moment where Kevin Feige becomes the name you hear about. Up till now, we would hear about Joe Quesada, and Brian Michael Bendis was helping, and Ed Brubaker was helping Mark Millar. There was this brain trust. Around this time, you just start hearing Kevin Feige, and that and he's doing a great job. It's not a criticism, but he becomes the architect, where he is the most important person, and he's hiring directors to come in and fulfill his vision. And every now and then there'll be a Taika Waititi or a James Gunn or a Sam Raimi that he'll loosen the leash, but he's becoming the person that holds it all together. And arguably why the MCU works is that it's so consistent across movies, and that they do reference one another. And what happens in this movie affects the television show, and it affects the next movie. That this becomes like a television show. It's the biggest budget television show in history. Every 6 months you get 2 hours. And on top of that, like every 2 months, you also get 6 episodes.
This will be the second movie distributed by Walt Disney Studios. Thor: The Dark World will be the first. This is after Walt Disney buys Marvel Studios. And so for those who complain that the Marvel movies were ruined by Disney, the quality of the films will take a sharp uptick from this point forward.
I like that comment about the Marvel movies as TV with Feige in the position of like the showrunner. Like, to compare it to Community, Dan Harmon was like the showrunner, the kind of brain trust, but kind of like the MCU does have a similar format to Community in the sense they switch genres from movie to movie. Like, we talked about this movie, like I talked about my route. This movie actually has like 4 different genres over the course of 2 hours. And then you get to, I believe the next one, Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's basically Star Wars. That's basically your sci-fi epic. And then you go to Ant-Man, and it's a heist movie. So we talk about, well, they're comic book movies, but they're not the same movie. They're all they all exist within different kind of genres of film. And that was something that they, on the show Community, they would do on a week-to-week basis. They would switch between different formats regularly. Like, they did like an Apocalypse Now episode. They did a zombie episode. They did all kinds of different things where they would just switch from scene to scene. The only thing that would stay the same, much like the MCU, is the characters. So you had something to anchor it as you went from Whiplash to Whiplash.
And it's kind of like a precursor to WandaVision in that way.
Ooh.
Where WandaVision gets to give you a bunch of different views from different decades, and the shows are done in different styles.
Oh.
Wow. You blew his mind.
I think you did blow my mind, because that's kind of like one of those like like the man behind the curtain type thing of like, the painting of a painting of a painting of like, either that or my drink's empty.
Either way.
And that's what keeps the MCU from getting stale, because as he said, the criticism of all these movies are the same. They saw that turn in the road coming before anybody. This was at a point where it was like, oh yeah, just keep giving us superhero movies. And Warner Brothers is trying to get into the interconnected movies after just doing Batman for 20 years. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to do all this. And, everybody talks about Batman versus Superman and then Justice League. But really they had started with Green Lantern. The idea was Ryan Reynolds was going to be the Green Lantern in Justice League. But then when that movie didn't work, they just kind of shuffled them into a drawer and tried to keep going. But DC also tried to make all of their movies Batman. And Kevin Feige didn't even want all his movies to be Avengers. And Guardians is the huge swing. This is subversive, because it's a sequel. We all know who Captain America is. Okay, we're going to get more characters like Falcon and Winter Soldier, but it's going to be Captain America. And then when you sit down, it's not what you expect at all. And this is when Kevin Feige starts thinking like every movie's got to be its own thing. And that way you keep it from being repetitious. And because it's not repetitious, it doesn't get boring.
Can I tell you guys a fun adjacent Green Lantern story?
Yes, you may.
So I'm at White Sox Park doing a radio show. They tell me that the rapper Common is going to hang out and be a part of the broadcast, that he's in town. He's from Chicago. So I'm like, I got to get Common on because there's some things that I want to ask him. I'm literally wearing a Green Lantern t-shirt at the time. Okay. He walks into the radio booth and he's like, oh, so you're a Green Lantern fan? I was like, yeah, I love Green Lantern. He's like, yeah, I wanted to be Green Lantern. And they told me I had a chance to be Green Lantern. And then they decided that they were going to make the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern. And see how that turned out? He was hot about the fact that he didn't get to be John Stewart. He really wanted to be John Stewart Green Lantern.
That sounds like a really good movie too.
Yeah, doesn't it?
It does. It does because I've seen Common in a few. Was he in John Wick 2? If you get John Wick 2 Common as John Stewart Green Lantern, ooh, because now I'm thinking about like the Justice League cartoon. Ooh, that's a good
it could have been a thing, man. I mean, I guess they could technically go back to it, but I'm so fearful. Like anytime someone brings up Green Lantern, because like Green Lantern was my DC guy, the way that Cap was my Marvel guy, and every time someone brings it up, I'm like, man, they really screwed that up. Like they could have done so many different stories to try to do a Green Lantern origin story, and they just couldn't get it right.
And they still don't know what to do with it because there's a feeling at Warner Bros. Are like, well, Green Lantern bombed, but then the guy we picked Green Lantern became Deadpool. So maybe we want to make another movie with this guy, but everybody hates Green Lantern, and then just nothing happens.
Yep.
I think wasn't Common cast as Green Lantern in the George Miller Justice League that never happened?
He may have been.
That was the one where Armie Hammer was going to be Batman, and I can't remember who else. They had they had a Flash and Superman and Wonder Woman. I think that was the one that he was actually cast in, and for whatever reason, it completely fell apart.
The writer's strike killed it, Dave.
Yeah,
they didn't have a finished script, and when the writer's strike happened, they couldn't finish it, and they just dropped it.
Yeah, and looking back now, that probably would have been a lot better than the one that we got. I remember at the time it was like they're just going to do Justice League movie where they like introduce all these individual iterations of the character at once and like expect the audience to care. It's like, well, that's kind of what they did in the Justice League movie we got anyway. I mean, they had just introduced Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, but like the rest, like they're just kind of shoehorning Aquaman and Flash and Cyborg into this movie and expecting the audience to care about these characters. I think George Miller would have given I'm not sold on some of the casting decisions, but I mean, Common as John Stewart is like a no-brainer.
Well, then they also gave us that cookie at the end of Green Arrow. Like they gave us the Green Lantern cookie at the end of Green Arrow, and I was like, you know what? Screw you guys. Like it's right there for you the whole time. There's some brave and bold stuff that you could have done inside of this, and then like literally the last scene, you give us Green Lantern, but then you know that you're not going to give us a Green Lantern series. Screw you guys.
Talking about, let me throw this out. Since we're talking about where the DCU movies might have fallen short, I would say the biggest challenge that they have with the DC movies, they're Superman. They just, for some reason, just can't seem to crack the nut that is outside of when Christopher Reeve played the character. Give me a Superman that is faithful to the comics, that is faithful to the spirit of the character and all that, without quote unquote making him boring, which is what they always say. You know, Superman's he's such a goody two shoes. He's a Boy Scout. Why would people root for him? Then you look at Captain America, who is almost literally a Boy Scout, who is all those things, aspirational, a good guy, believes in people, believes in leading, believes, of course, the best line from Winter Soldier is I'm with you till the end of the line. You know, that's a great, you know, a line that Cap says to Bucky, to show the bond of brotherhood they have, even when he believes that Bucky's going to kill him right there on the helicarrier at the end. So Marvel seems to be able to figure it out and make Captain America work. Captain America is essentially Marvel's Superman.
Well, Elliot, this is something that Laurence brought up earlier. Laurence brought up of like Cap versus regular people. And because Cap is powered, but he's not Superman powered. So we can talk about that. Like maybe that's a topic we should talk about, that first fight on that ship.
Oh, Batroc.
The Batroc fight.
Made Batroc scary. Batroc was goofy in his first appearance. Stan Lee created Batroc and didn't take him seriously. And I was actually fearful that Batroc would kill people.
I loved the casting of George St. Pierre as Batroc, though. Like, you couldn't have asked for, hey, you know what we need? We need a guy who is in really good shape, is a really good fighter, and also speaks French. Oh, okay, cool. How about UFC champion George St. Pierre? Oh, you're going to make him Batroc the Leaper? Okay, cool. That worked for me because I'm such a sports geek on top of being a comic geek. I was like, hey, look at this. This makes sense to me.
It's a great fight scene, too.
You became Leonardo DiCaprio in that meme. Where, you know,
that was me. I had a drink and I was like, hey.
And this is how not a sports geek I am, at least about UFC. I did not realize that he was a UFC fighter.
He's honestly one of the greatest fighters ever.
Wow. Which
if you're putting together a top 10 all time, George St. Pierre is on it.
Wow. Just like Captain America is supposed to be Marvel's greatest fighter. You know, it's a whole. If Captain America and Batman in the comics fight each other, Captain America is going to win. He's the best overall. And even in the movies, I'm telling you, you take the Chris Evans Batman and put him up against any of the movie Batmans. I'm telling you, Cap would kick Batman's ass. I'm sorry, he'll just do it. You know.
I like to going back to our George Perez discussion. There's a moment in Justice League Avengers where they're going to fight and they look each other up and down and they were like, this would take forever and it's not worth it. And they both just walk away because that, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big Batman fan, but you're right. That fight would go on for days.
Yeah. And Batman at the end does admit, okay, you could beat me, but it would take you a long time. So yeah.
Hey, he'll do this all day.
Yep.
Elliot, I'm looking for my DC versus Marvel comic from the 90s where Batman actually defeats Captain America.
Oh, yeah, because it was a call-in vote. Wolverine defeated Lobo in that book.
That's very funny. I knew you were going to bring that up because but mind you, it's Ron Mars who would write that particular chapter, or he wrote the entire book. Now that I think about it. He scripted that, and the entire battle between Cap and Batman takes place on one page. It's one page. You know,
the Wolverine Lobo fight. They're in a bar. They start arguing. They fall behind the bar. There's a panel of the bar, and then Wolverine gets up. So Ron Mars has been on Captivated Comics, but Ron Mars got to that moment and was like, there's no way this can happen. I'm not even going to show it. It's like in Deep Space Nine when they realize the Klingons don't have bumps in the triples. It's like, yeah, we're not even going to get near that.
So I always say, whenever it comes to battles between two characters, who can win? Whoever the writer says. They recently did Batman versus Snake Eyes of G.I. Joe. Christos Gage wrote it for the DC. What's the video game? Now I'm sounding really old right now. Fortnite. I wanted to say Farpoint because you got Star Trek in my head. But Fortnite. He did Batman versus Snake Eyes, and they have like this long involved fight. So they raised Snake Eyes cred there.
Well, speaking of that fight with Batroc, this is also where we see Steve in the stealth outfit, which is the first Captain America outfit that works.
I was going to ask
like
you because,
in First Avenger, you're like, all right, it's a big, bulky World War II outfit. The Avengers one doesn't work. Blue condom comes up. They had to cover his ears at the last minute because the ears sticking out weren't working. So then they couldn't figure it out until they did this stealth armor one. And this is the Marvel Legends. And as I was saying on the last episode, this is when Marvel Legends decided to really come back and start doing the movies. And this guy still looks fantastic. Like the idea that he's wearing the Commander Rogers outfit that was in the comics recently at that point. And then the shield is just the red is scraped off because you can't break the shield, but you can get rid of the paint. And after this, every Captain America outfit is a version of the stealth armor.
Oh,
like
that is
wears that helmet
ass.
for the.
Dave, in your uniform expertise, how would you rate the because we get 2 Cap outfits in this movie, the stealth outfit in particular, because how do you, if you turn your instead of turning your attention to the White Sox uniforms, turn your attention to Cap's armor?
Oh man, the stealth one's pretty great. I don't know, that might be one of my favorites. Yeah, Laurence, if Tom and I are like big baseball uniform geeks, we talk all about like perfecting the White Sox uniforms and the best uniforms in baseball history. So that's where that comment is coming from.
Well, they're rocking the City Connects tonight.
Yeah, and they're winning. At least last I checked.
I think it's the uniforms that do it.
So maybe they'll be their good luck this year.
It's the black pants. It's all about the black pants. They finally did the reverse pins on the black uniform that I've been wanting them to do for probably the last 5 years, at least the last 5 years. But yeah,
that stealth outfit's pretty great.
Yeah,
I'm a fan. It's America's ass.
Laurence, speaking of the White Sox uniforms, who do we need to talk to get them to bring back the little white sock with the wings on it?
Well, it's weird. They won't do that on the uniform, but I'll tell you, the general manager of the White Sox, Rick Hahn, he's got a collection of quarter zips that are out of this world. And when he does press conferences, he's kind of been wearing different ones. We've seen the script C come back in some of his press conferences. The Go-Go Sox logo has come back. He has one that has the CHI, like the City Connect. I told him, I was like, I need the key to that closet. Like I want some of those quarter zips to rock. I want the script C to come back. And I actually have some design ideas to modernize the script C. I think it's the most hated on Sox logo for
this
no
guy right here
reason.
doesn't like it.
I have my issue. I have my issues with the C. It's not as bad as the 83. Well, you can tweak the strip C by shortening the tail so it's more of a hook that doesn't go all the way through the vertical line on the C. You can do that. I've mocked up too many concepts that have that over the years. I've done too many mock-ups trying to fix that C.
I think they need to do something with the script C that speaks to the Chicago American Giants, the Negro Leagues team. I think you could play around with that script C and make it look real good.
Is that your favorite throwback, Laurence? The late 80s ones?
Like, I dig the Hitman. Oh, see, there it is. There we go with the Chicago American Giants.
Yeah. Very
in the
cool.
beat stripes. I'm not as big of. I mean, the Hitman's cool, and I have a couple of Hitman caps, and I have I don't know if you guys have ever been down to Birmingham, but the Birmingham Barons have a cap that says Beham on
I've
it
seen that one. Yeah,
with the Hitman, which is pretty dope.
It's black and red too, which is good.
Yeah, it's a good look. It's a really good look. I don't mind I like the kind of block Go-Go Sox, red, white, and black. I love that one. I love the Sox like Bats one too. But you know, to me, they haven't had anything that looks too terrible. Even the throwbacks that Chris Sale cut up
I'm never going to forgive him for that.
Nor should you. It's quite
I was
ridiculous.
looking forward to that game, and I remember on the radio, Ed Farmer was like, "Oh, Sox tonight are in their 83." He was like, "Wait a second, this is supposed to be their 76 uniforms." Unless his years mixed up, but he wore those. He should know.
Right. He would know because he would definitely he wore those uniforms. And think about what that gave us. That gave us torn up uniforms, probably the beginning of the end of Chris Sale as a White Sox. And it gave us Drake LaRoche is a leader on our team. A 13-year-old boy is leading a clubhouse full of men.
Those were supposed to be the all blue, much like the Sox are wearing tonight, of solid monochrome color, and all blue, just like Cap has in the stealth uniform, which is all navy blue from head to toe.
You know what I just noticed looking at this now, and I've had this figure since the movie came out. There is red. He's still red, white, and blue. There's one stripe down his thigh that's still red. And it never occurred to me. I was like, oh, this is the dark one, so they got rid of all the red. He's not bright. But he's red. He's still red, white, and blue. The silver is the white. But he's still true to form, no matter how much he has to compromise. And that's what this movie is about. This movie is about how do you stay pure around when you're surrounded by people who compromise and who compromise to the fact that they lessen themselves.
Yeah.
How do you stand upright against that? And he does, like you said, Laurence, at the end, I'm with you to the end of the line. He will not give up on Bucky, even though he might not be able to survive by hanging on to him.
And for those who are listening to the audio version of this show, and you're wondering why we are making visual references, that's because you're not watching the live stream on Facebook.com/MCU ReVU or on Twitch.tv /MCU ReVU, or even on our MCU ReVU YouTube page. So if you go to any of those pages, give us a like, subscribe, share, comment, help us grow the pages, send us around. You will go see, we're going to have lots more guests on the show to talk about movies coming up in the future. Next up, we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as what came after Guardians. I'm looking at Ultron, Avengers, Age of Ultron. So if you're listening to the podcast, of course, make sure you share. Go to the radiomisfits.com webpage, look up Caffeinated Comics, where every other episode or so is an episode of the MCU ReVU. You can tell because Alexa's going to tell you it's a different type of episode. That's whenever I tell Alexa to play the podcast for me. And you will also hear a distinctly different theme song written by our very own John Clark, who, believe it or not, figured out a way to give a grungy rock sound to the Avengers theme.
So, I don't have strings. Not getting an orchestra in here.
There you go. All right. So before we let our guest go, want to go around the horn. Laurence, any final thoughts on the Winter Soldier? I'll throw this out to you. The Winter Soldier, White Sox uniforms, 3/4 zips, or anything else?
I really, when you asked me to do this, it was my first response. Absolutely. That's the movie that I want to talk about. As I've gotten farther away from it, I still really love it. I still think that a lot of the themes of it are great. Even the themes of let's find Steve a girlfriend, even that theme I thought was great. And I love the line of where he's like, oh, there's such and such an accounting thinks you're cute. And he's like, the lip ring, I'm not ready for that. I love that there is some of that in it. And obviously the Trouble Man soundtrack with Marvin Gaye, and that song is now connected with the Trouble Man Black exploitation movie and with Captain America Winter Soldier. It plays such and the movie Four Brothers. So that song has found its way every 20 years. It pops up and becomes a part of a movie. And
That's funny, Laurence, because you just reminded me that this was also one of the first movies where they changed it depending on the country where it aired. And in the beginning, when Anthony Mackie mentions Trouble Man, he goes, "I'll write it down on the list," and you see the shot of his notebook. That page is different in every country.
Is that right?
Yes. In England, it's like he writes down Doctor Who instead of Star Wars / Star Trek. And at the time, they had posted every single page, so it was culturally relevant.
That's
So I don't know if Trouble Man is on every version, or it's possible they may have changed that song in other countries because they play it in the hospital as well as talk about it.
Yeah, it's the movie that gets us the where everyone is, like where Hill is, where Agent 13 goes to the CIA. Like it's all like setting everything up and also gives us the on your left from him. But you guys were talking about Ultron. I hated Ultron when I saw it. The more I've watched it, the more I appreciate that too.
It's funny you should mention that. I'm sure we'll bring that up. I feel the same way. I remember when I first saw Age of Ultron, I was like, it's okay. Then I've since rewatched it a few times. I'm like, this movie actually is not that bad. It's actually, for a second act, it felt like a little wheel spinning because come on, friggin' give us Thanos. And that's not going to come for a bit. But no, I agree with you. I end up liking it more.
I don't know if I've seen that one since it was in theaters. Maybe I watched it once. And now it seems like sort of the whipping boy of other than like Dark World. And I don't know. I remember really enjoying it in theaters. So when we get to that one, I'm looking forward to going back and revisiting it and trying to sort of take note of the stuff that people sort of crap on it for. Because I like that one. I remember really liking that one.
And Tom, I'm going to give you another assignment. Come up with an Age of Ultron drink. A drink that's generally better than you remember.
So a drink that's better than you remember. Well, I was thinking about Ultron earlier today, and there's that scene in Ultron. You talk about Cap and Sam in this movie where they have the party in Age of Ultron, and Thor brings out the liquor that's been distilling for 1,000 years in barrels made from the wreck of Grunthar's ship or something like that. And there is, I believe, Hamilton makes a 150 proof barrel-aged rum from Barbados that might have to come in. My normal go-to on the rum scene is the 126 proof Ray and Nephew.
Writing that down as someone who loves rum.
I like my brain cells. I don't know if I want to.
Well, the Ray and Nephew that's the one that my wife would get from her family, and that's like it gradually lowers in volume whether you open the cap or not because it just starts to evaporate. But when you crack it and you get that aroma of just ripe bananas, of banana bread, and it just fills your nose. Like if you put that in, it a little goes a long way in like a rum and coke or something like that. I love mixing it with like a sharp ginger beer with like a Barrett's or Gosling's, like a sharp ginger beer that's with a lime. That's something that I really like. It works great in tiki drinks like Mai Tais and things like that. But that's usually my go for. And then there's the 117 proof Smith and Cross is also good, but it's going to be some combination for that one. It's going to be some combination of a bunch of overproof rum, something that could actually make Steve Rogers drunk, or at least feel a little tinkle in his fingers or something like that.
Jeez.
Yeah, Elliot, one of the drinks I made for tonight that Tom provided the recipe for was a Steve Rogers Cuba Libre. And I had a teentiest bit of the 007 rum that you got me left that was just enough to use in his drink. And it really nice. Very nice.
Ooh. We'll have to post that recipe on the Shaken Not Heard page, as well as MCU ReVU page. And John, you have any final thoughts?
This movie is more iconic than I thought. When I rewatched it, the boys were over, and I don't know. I took my older one to it when it came out, and so he knows well. But I don't know that my younger one has ever seen it. And I asked them, "Hey guys, do you want to see this movie?" And they were like, "Nah, we're playing video games." They didn't feel like it at the moment, so I was watching it by myself. And every 5-10 minutes, I would just yell down the hall. I'd be like, "It's the elevator! You have to see the elevator!" And they would come in, they would just love that scene. And even though they didn't stick around for the whole thing, I was like, this movie really is full of moments that will stick with me forever. Like they'll stick with me in a way that like Indiana Jones moments stick with me. You know, there's very, very iconic moments, and it's not the way they look, and it's not the people playing them. It's the moments that are created in this movie. And again, as I was saying in the beginning, that's the bar that Marvel Studios has to clear now every single time.
That is true.
That's great.
All right. Well, I think Laurence has been so kind to give us so much of his time. I want to let him go. But before we go, Laurence, if you could tell everyone where they can find you, see you, listen to you, read about you, all that good stuff.
They can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. At Laurence W. Holmes is where you can find me. I do a radio show from noon until 2, Monday through Friday on 670 The Score, 670thescore.com, twitch.tv/Chicago 670 The Score. And I do a podcast called House of L, where I talk about all sorts of stuff, including comic books, and interview smart people and interview comic book writers occasionally and historians. There's a really good episode I did with historian Cord Scott on the propaganda of comic books that I think you all would enjoy. I did it last June or July. So really, really good stuff. And I love to be creative. And I can tell you guys, and I'll tell the people that are part of this podcast, I have been working on a project with Kyle Higgins that will be out this summer.
Kyle Higgins did a really good run on Nightwing, I remember, back in the early New 52.
Yep. And I am very excited about what we are working on.
So you'll be talking about that on House of L?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It'll be significant.
Excellent. And yes, and I have been on House of L. And
it's
always a lot of fun.
King of the Geeks.
And I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. So again, when people go, why are you calling yourself that? I didn't call myself that. Laurence calls me that.
Blame me for that. It's giving Elliot a big head, but he has definitely earned the moniker.
You didn't give yourself that nickname like G-Bone.
T-Bone. You can't be two T-Bones.
Can't
Thanks
be.
for bringing in. I gotta go before we go through all the. This is how my day's been. I woke up this morning. Okay. Remember that episode of The Office called The Dinner Party, when Michael and Jan had Jim and Pam and a bunch of folks from the office over for dinner, and Jan plays a song that her assistant wrote for her on that really bad album. That song has been going through my head since I woke up this morning, and nothing will get that freaking song out of my head right now. That's how insidious this bug I have is. It's putting crappy songs in my head.
You can always push it out with a worse song.
Yeah.
What is worse?
Barbie Girl. You're welcome.
I can go for there. Tom, where can people follow you on social media, or if at all?
Don't. I have some private Facebook and Instagram accounts that are pictures of my wife and kids, and that's about it.
But people can find your recipes where
you can find them on. You can find all my recipes that I do for the show on the MCU ReVU Facebook and Instagram handles. By all means, check them out. And if you like them, by all means, share. And if you don't like them, please tell me what I did wrong, because I am actually trying to do this well. And if I did something, if you think my drink is bad, please tell me if it might think my drink is bad. We had an interesting drink last week, and so far I haven't gotten any negative reviews on it, but I'd like to
Ellie, I still have to see you to give you the ingredients for that drink.
Yeah, I know.
In like a week and a half.
A friend of mine who is also a professional mixologist saw your recipe and commented on it and said how good she thought it sounded. So yeah.
There you go.
That's today's, I believe. Yeah, today's sounded good.
Dave?
I am on Instagram at Pinto_noir. Most of my photos are of my chubby little goblin of a dog. Elliot knows him well.
Yeah, he's a great dog. Does he wear any White Sox gear?
He does. He has his collar he has on every day is a White Sox collar I swiped from the shelter.
There we go. And John?
I'm at Not in My Book on Twitter and Instagram. That is supposed to be the Caffeinated Comics feed, but Twitter is mostly jokes I write, and Instagram's all pictures of Marvel Legends. But you can also subscribe to Caffeinated Comics anywhere you get comics, anywhere you get podcasts, as well as the MCU ReVU, which is a significant part of the show.
And of course, I'm Elliot Serrano. You can follow me on all social media platforms by my name, 2 L's, 2 T's, and 2 R's. You can also catch all the episodes of Shaken Not Heard that Dave and I did, following pretty much the same format that we use for the MCU ReVU. Go to facebook.com/Shaken Not Heard to catch the video archive, as well as youtube.com/C/Shaken Not Heard, and you will find the last 10 episodes, I believe, on there. Please, by all means, like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up where you can. Help us grow this channel. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, for watching. Whether you watch us live, whether you're listening to us on the podcast, we appreciate it. And hopefully the next time you guys hear me, I'm not going to sound like Thanos snapped away half my voice. Until next time, everybody, be good to each other. Have a good night, good week. And we're with you till the end of the line.